Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Kalinga Literary Festival. With me today, we have Anuradha Roy, who happens to be one of my favorite writers. Anuradha Roy is an award winning Indian novelist, journalist, and editor. She has written 5 novels: An Atlas of Impossible Longing, The Folded Earth, Sleeping on Jupiter, All the Lives We Never Lived. Her third novel, Sleeping on Jupiter, won the DSE Prize for South Asian Literature and was longlisted for the Man Booker Prize. We are here to discuss her latest novel, The Earth Spinner. Welcome, Anuradha.
Hi, lovely to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we're so happy you're here. So before we begin, I was so drawn to the gorgeous cover. It's very unusual, and you know, animals are such a big part of this book. There's a rooster, there's donkeys. Before I come to the horse, and most of all, there's a dog. So tell us how you use animals to talk about these big themes: religious violence, migration, so many themes.
I've been thinking about stray dogs quite a lot because of this book. I have I have 3.5 dogs because I have three, and then there's a fourth who comes and spends the whole day with us every day because he's a neighbor's and has no one looking after him all through the day. And these are all strays. We have found them, or they have found us. And I've been thinking about the place of strays in. It's a very archetypal thing in the Indian landscape. The sort of curly-tailed stray around the
Yes.
streets, around the tea shops, following you home from somewhere, and they get treated extremely cruelly on the whole, but also they are friends with quite a few people. And I felt that this creature, the stray, who moves seamlessly between communities, between people, would be the right person to put at the center of a book which is about divisions, about conflict, about religion tearing people apart. So that's the reason, partly the reason the dog is in the book. And I've, as you said, often, almost always had animals in the book to signify various things in the novel about humankind.
Right. And, the cover is so gorgeous. It's got this mythical horse. And did you design it?
I didn't, but the designer has is a Colombian. She's called Monica Reyes
Okay.
Alvarez, and she has been designing the UK editions book covers all along. And from the second book on, I think she did the Indian ones as well. So she and I have a wonderful rapport. I do design book covers for Permanent Black, and she knows that. So she and I can talk. We are on the same page when we are talking about designs.
That's why I asked, because you do design as well. It's absolutely
She
gorgeous.
actually made a clay horse. The horse on the cover, she had asked me for photographs of the horses I had in mind when writing the book. And I sent her photos of these giant INR horses from Tamil Nadu. And she actually made a small version and then photographed it and created the cover.
So that's really quite incredible. So did she like make it in ceramic or just clay?
No, I think she used, you get these clays which are air drying clays now, which
Right,
are easier to, they don't need to be fired for them to be tough. So
right,
she used one of those and made it.
right. So coming to this gorgeous clay horse. It has Urdu calligraphy on it. It's this mythical creature. Um, Tell us about the symbolism of the horse, and tell us about the book.
Well, the book actually started for me with the horse in the sense that uh, in the book, the potter has a dream of a clay horse which is spewing fire from its nostrils and eyes. And I had come across horses made out of clay in Bengal, in Bankura, because I'm Bengali, and those horses were all around on people's shelves and so on. And then later, as I myself began to do pottery and read about it a lot, I discovered these giant clay horses in South India, in Tamil Nadu particularly, but also Andhra Pradesh, who are made every year by the community of traditional potters of the village as a ritual to then once the horse is made and fired, it's taken out in a procession, which is for the protection of the whole village. And then I read further about the horse in Hindu mythology, and that there's this horse underwater, under the oceans,
Yeah.
mythically, which concentrates all of Lord Shiva's anger and passions and sexual passions as well, which is put into this horse, which is breathing fire underwater. And I found that an incredibly powerful image for all the forces that we keep, subterranean. And this became the center of the book, in which the potter, who is a Hindu, has fallen in love with a Muslim girl called
Mm.
Zora. And he decides to make this horse as a gigantic gift for her. It's the best that he can do. And he, in a fit of pure creativity and imagination, he decides that it will be inscribed with Urdu calligraphy. So he actually turns this religious horse into a secular one, into a gift for his beloved, which is inscribed in a language which speaks differently to different people. So that's where the central conflict of the book lies.
And it's also interesting because it has this calligraphy, and he cannot read Urdu, if
Yeah,
I'm not
yeah,
mistaken. And I found that so fascinating because it's this act of love, and sometimes he wonders, is he really making it for her? Is he making it for
yeah,
himself?
yeah,
And and I love that because so much of this book is about creativity. The whole
yeah,
I don't know how to put it. It's a very private process of. I'm just trying to look for the question. The private process of creativity and creative forms, and there are also several art forms in the book. There's calligraphy, there's pottery. So tell us about that. How, because it's so hard to put that in words, and somehow you managed to do that. So how do you translate that? The whole.
I actually, when I wrote my first book, which now seems very long ago, about 15 years ago, these questions of the imagination and art and creativity didn't occupy me, in the sense that I was writing a book, but I was still unaware of all these other things that go into the whole process, which is, as in the book, that the person making something has not only to deal with what is inside, that is, you have to tap your imagination, your persistence, your self belief that you need to make what you're making and you will be able to do it, and to carry on with that job. But there are also, I slowly became aware of all these external things, which could be as basic as time or space or material, the material things that many writers don't earn enough from their writing to run their lives. So they need to do something else to actually earn. And in the potter's world too, he has to make lines of utilitarian and other things. And he somehow has to carve out the time and pay for the material to make this particular horse, which is the only thing he actually wants to make. So there's this whole churning when you're creating something, of battles within as well as
Mhm.
battles with forces without, which ends up making that whole book in the end. For example, very often people will say, if I had 2 months more with this book, I would have changed whatever in chapter 3. But
Yeah.
maybe you didn't have those 2 months, so you didn't do that final thing that you later regret not doing. So there are these, from the mundane to the absolutely abstract, as well as the political. In his case, the community opposes him making this horse. So these forces are what I'm interested in, which stand between the object you're trying to create and you, and make the whole thing complicated as well as exciting too.
Right, and it's such a it's so subtle. This, the fact that you managed to translate it into words, because how do you even describe the whole process? I don't know. I find that
Yeah.
difficult, at least with my watercolor paintings, I'm just not able to articulate the process into words. And then there's the other part of how that is received,
Do
uh,
you paint? That's lovely to know.
just for myself.
Yeah,
Uh,
well, I think everything that I write for myself. I'm sure you do too,
I know,
because
but like not, I don't want to show people. I mean, you know what I mean. Like,
yeah,
if,
yeah,
I
I
do see a pottery also. It's so gorgeous. Uh,
yeah. But
yeah,
it takes quite a while before when you're making something to be in a place where you're ready to show it to people.
yeah,
Because for a long time, like when I'm writing, I don't want to show the draft half done to anybody,
of
or
course.
individual
Yeah,
chapters. Many people are at a different comfort level with that, especially people who have been through creative writing school are very used to sharing work in progress,
right.
whereas I'm not at all. So your what painting you is probably still a work in progress, and you'll reach a point where you are ready to show it to us.
Yeah, yeah, and that's so interesting you mentioned that, because even I'm like that. Also, part of it is I don't know what's going to happen. Sometimes in chapter 7, I'll go back to chapter 2 and add something, and it's different.
Yeah,
And it it's so
yeah.
it's so private. I'm very uncomfortable as well sharing it.
Mm.
I have a writers group as well, but it's more like we are called shut up and write, literally.
Oh,
So
good.
yeah,
Yeah,
so we just meet for 15 minutes and we just write for an hour.
yeah.
It's so such
Well,
a
I'm forgetting which writer it was. She was very prolific. She wrote, I think, either mysteries or romances, and was incredibly prolific and had a very devoted following. And they would keep asking her, how is it that you produce a book a year, every year you've
oh
done
wow.
it? And she just said, ass on chair, which is like shut up and write, that you
Yeah,
just sit
that's
down
so
and get the job done.
yeah, and that's exactly how it works. Somehow, in the pandemic, I fell out of it, but all of them meet from 8:30 to 12 on Zoom, and they just give each other dirty stare if anyone tries to make a conversation or takes a bathroom break or anything,
Okay.
and they've all gotten a lot done. I didn't join because all those
Yeah.
other screen stuff. But just it's fascinating how the process works. And I wanted to just come to that. I did a little bit of pottery when I was
Okay.
younger, very little, and I was so
Mhm.
fascinated. And I also feel as writers we're so in our heads, and you can I feel that even with painting it's abstract, but with pottery you can touch and you can feel, and it
Yeah.
feels like the biggest luxury, at least
Mm.
speaking as a writer, because
Yeah.
I don't know, it's tangible, it's solid, it's not just
Yeah. Yeah.
invisible, out there.
Yeah.
How did you get into pottery? How does that affect your writing? I mean, it's your writing process. Did that inspire
I
the book?
it inspired the book in the sense that I had wanted to find a way to write about pottery because it interested me so deeply. I wanted to find a way towards it in fiction, which I wasn't able to do for quite a while. So I had been writing essays on things to do with pottery. I had written one long essay on trying to find the right color in a glaze.
Hmm.
Then I had written another essay on parts of which went into the novel actually, which was just about the material, it- the
Yeah.
clay, and about processes in geology that bring that clay about. So, and it fascinated me that so many things to do with minerals and the earth that we are standing on can be transferred to the cup we are drinking from.
Yes.
So, this whole business of one kind of thing transforming totally through an artistic process into another kind of thing
Right.
But still, it had really struck me when I was reading about archaeology that of course, the oldest things you find in places like the Indus or the Egyptian civilizations are pottery. You can still find cups made by 3,000 years ago. You can find a Harappan toy,
Mm.
mm, that little bullock cart made
Yeah.
in Mohenjo-daro. So the fact that this clay becomes a part of the earth that it is from
Yeah.
really made me think that there's some way I want to bring it and make it a part of some fiction that I'm writing as well. But it took me a really long time to find the right kind of fictional narrative in which I could, to figure out the way towards it. And the pottery itself, it does help, I think, that I've been doing it a long time. Since I was quite young in college. And I was making things before that just out of clay, but I properly started to learn when I was in college. And then with breaks, I've been learning right now. You never stop learning when it's pottery. That's the other thing. It just goes on and on. There's a lot of reading to do, lot to discover all the time. And that's what makes you want to carry on with it.
So one wouldn't consider. I don't know. It's fascinating to me. I didn't think that one would need to read a lot for pottery. Although now, maybe.
Oh, you have to. I mean, if you're trying to really understand the processes for yourself and make things yourself, as opposed to just going to a studio, making a few things, and letting someone else fire it for you, then you are reading non-stop. I read a lot every day. uh, and there are techniques from all over the world that you read about, and then you arrive at a language of your own gradually. It takes a very long time. I was very struck the other day. There's a British potter who has been making wonderful pots which she's been selling at, you know high prices in very good places. And she wrote to me saying, I'm still trying to find my own language and I haven't found it yet. And she's probably been making pots for 25, 30 years.
But that's beautiful, right? You're still seeking, because once you find it, then you're.
Yeah.
I don't know. I guess it's like a treasure hunt.
Yeah. And you asked about the relationship with writing, and that aspect is something it very much shares, I think,
Yeah.
with writing, because every time you finish a book, it's not as though now you know everything about writing and the next one will be done in
Oh, you
one
never
month
know.
flat. No, of course not. With every book, you discover something else that you want to do.
So how long did it take for you to finish the first draft of this one?
I write first drafts pretty quickly. I mean, before the first draft, I have a very long time I take to reach that point where I'm ready to write a first draft. But after that, it may have taken me 6 to 8 months to write a very short first draft.
And so many of our viewers happen to be literature students, professors, and we're very interested in the process. So, what's your process like? So, you said before you begin the first draft, you do a lot. Is it research? Is it just notes? Is it understanding your characters?
I think it's a lot of just, yeah, thinking, reading, walking a lot, and thinking, I can't do this. This time I really won't be able to manage this.
Right.
So, and then a number of false starts which just go on. I'd start off with longhand in a diary. So it'll gradually fill up with notes and thoughts and character notes and so on, and then maybe bits, little paras, maybe the start, maybe the whatever I feel, images that are coming into my head concerning the book. And then at some point I feel, okay, now I've got the beginning and I can then start writing the first draft, which I want to really finish while the whole idea is still
Hmm.
very it has that force of newness, the
Yes.
energy of you having just woken up and thought, I
Mhm.
have to write this thing
Yeah.
today. But that feeling has to last the whole of those 8 or 6 months that it'll take. And then when the first draft is done and I think I'm ready to show it to one person, which is Rukun, my husband. He's a editor and a publisher. So I will show it to him just to get a sense of, is this all some thing in my own head that makes no sense to anybody else, or does it? So he is a very good kind of, what do you call it? He has a very good fake detector, or whatever you call it,
Lie
a,
detector, what is
a crap detector. So
it?
if it is crap, he'll
His
be able
writing
to.
is absolutely exquisite. Some of the sentences are so piercing, and they just stay with you.
Oh,
So yes,
thank you,
there's
thank you.
a lot of craft. And then, do you have a routine when you are writing? Do you just like we interviewed Amitabh Kumar some time back, and he was like, "I'll wake up and will write 150 words every day, no matter what." So
Okay.
yeah.
Oh, no, I don't. I mean, I don't write every day when I'm not writing a book.
Mhm.
It, when I am working on a novel, I work on it every single day, and it's very important for me. Maybe the morning, like Amitav says, has something about it which is full of potential you haven't
Yes,
yet.
yes. More
Yeah,
full of possibility, potential, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
So if I'm working on a novel, I will always work a solid, say, at least 3 hours in the morning to get a, a chunk written if I can. And then if I have had that time in the morning, then I'm able to go on till quite late in the night as well, if whenever I get time. But if I miss that morning spell, I've found that it really screws up the whole day and I can't get anything done after that.
That is that is true because your mind is cluttered with other stuff and
Yeah, I think something, yeah. No, I never write as a rule, meaning like right now I'm not working on a book, so I don't want to write at all. I will only make pots when I can get away from any other kind of work, because I we run a small publishing house. Rukun and I run a publishing house called Permanent Black. We publish history and
Mhm.
social sciences, politics, and I do the cover designs for our press. So I have quite a lot of other work that I need to do. So the 150 words, no, it isn't part of my routine.
So when you do write on mornings, is it very early or is it like 10 a.m.? Is it at dawn?
I basically I try to get down to work by about 10:30, so that I get a couple of hours or 3 hours, before I have to get around back. For the thing is that very often you read of. I've never been on a writer's retreat, for example, in all these years of writing. So I
Mm.
have never had this. I don't even know if I'd be able to function if I didn't have 200 other demands on my time. I
Yeah,
think I'd just laze and sleep and do nothing. But
that's
since
so
I
true.
know that I have these things I need to do also, those 3 hours in the morning and whatever time I get in the evening are very precious, and I want to just do as much as I can.
It's it's like that journalistic deadline, we have got to get to all this.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. You know that. Yeah.
yeah, it somehow reminds me of a small anecdote. Toni Morrison was an editor,
Hmm.
I think, was it at Random House? I don't
Yeah,
know.
she was at Random House. Yeah.
And so she and her friend decided to go to the country and we'll have our own little writer's residency. And she's like, I got nothing done. I went for a walk, I watched the birds,
Yeah.
I had a great vacation, but I didn't
Mm,
get a word done. So the same thing when she
absolutely.
came back,
Yeah.
all of her other demands somehow were very pressing and
Yeah,
to finish it. It's amazing how the human mind works because
absolutely.
you have to be very free while you write and be in that flow state and still just the psychology of it, still the pressure.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. 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 Do read of people who have been on residencies and got things done.
mhm.
And well, we'll see someday. Maybe it's because I live in the mountains that you feel as if you are already in a residency. So,
I was going to ask that. One of my questions was that how does living in the mountains affect your work? I mean, it's already very meditative, and you are at the mercy of the elements and so alive.
Yeah. The the thing is that since we live here and we are all it the whole business of it being I think people think of the mountains as a place where they can write because it is away from their normal life,
Mm. Mm.
whereas for me this is normal life.
Right.
This is where I have to cook meals and do book designs and wash dishes and all the rest of the
Mm.
things that we do. And then, of course, there are all these dogs we look after and so on. But in the mountains, I think you do get a sense of solitude which you don't get elsewhere, even if you have people around. There's
Mm.
this incredible silence which I really miss when I'm in a city. After 2 or 3 days, I start feeling like I need to get back. And when you drive up to the mountains, the moment you leave the plains behind and you stop for a bit and just listen to the silence, because there's a strange quality to it where there's a clarity and all the bird calls and the
Yes.
smallest insect humming, you can hear all that. And then I am a great walker. I can really think much more clearly about what I'm working on when I can walk. And in a city like Delhi, I find it infuriating that you have to drive to where you want to walk,
Yeah.
which will be a park full of people. And you have to go round and round like, those mice in a maze around the same path.
Mice in a maze, I like that. Yeah. Yeah.
Whereas here you step out and you have the whole forest, so you can. So we feel incredibly lucky that we have this kind, which is mindlessly boring for many people. Many people come here and want to leave immediately because they can't take the silence and they can't take the lack of things happening.
Entertainment. I don't know what else to call it. Lack of
Yeah,
city
yeah,
is full of distractions and entertainment, and mountains require you to be very present with yourself. And I mean, it can feel very empty unless you have a
yeah.
craft. Um,
I think you need to have something that is completely absorbing to do.
yes.
In If I didn't have work that occupied my mind completely, then I don't know if I could cope here either. But that's the whole thing, that they are mutually interdependent. The solitude feeds your work, and the work needs that solitude, that kind of thing.
Wonderful. So, were you always in the mountains? Is that a type of a life you decided to build, especially because you've always been a writer? How did that decision come about?
No, we used to live in Delhi. I used to work uh, at the Oxford University Press after I finished with university and so on. But I think what these seeds are probably planted in us very young, because my father was a geologist, like Sarah's father in the book. But my father used to have field postings when we were very little. Before we began school, we were allowed to go to some postings with him, my mother, me, and my brother. So we would live in tents at that time. And I think that whole business of living in tents when we were toddlers, basically, for 3 or 4 years or whatever it was, that some must have put in this thing inside me that I just feel happier in the wilderness with forests around and small places. I've lived in big cities. I've been to college in Calcutta. I've been to college in Britain, and uh, lived in Delhi. But this is where we came 20 years ago, and we never wanted to go anywhere else after
Right. And I wanted to, mentioning college, I wanted to come back a little bit to the book. Once again, we talked about you being a potter. You studied in England, and then there are dogs. How much of the book is from your real life? Because as somebody who follows your social media, it
that.
seems like quite a bit of it is, from real. It seems at
I
least.
think the book draws very strongly on my interests, my own interests. which are that it's like it's really like having a series of elements which do have to do with my own life, but then in the process of the writing and the creation of this fictional universe, those things become part of that fictional universe, and they move further and further away from my own life. So although these are things that I would say I'm deeply interested in and caring about, things like dogs or pottery,
Mm.
and there is this geologist father in the book, but the
Yes.
father in the book is really nothing like my father. He is not temperamentally very much like my father, and yet my father too did the same work, and he did tell us about the way the continents were formed and so on, which this father does in the book. So I think this is how it's just as we take the letters from the alphabet and write a sentence, but that sentence is not those individual alphabets. It has a life of its own. In a similar way, I would say elements from my life have made up the sentences in the book, but it's not my life at all. None of it. I mean, I wish I had had an Elango in my life as
I
a child.
know. What a character. Um, but there is, what about, the religious violence you portrayed in the book so gently from the 1980s? It's put so gracefully, and yet we have all of it in today's India, not at all secular. Is that based on something from your real life? I believe you went to a Muslim school in Hyderabad,
I
right?
did, yeah. The school in the book is based very closely on my own school, which was a completely unique school. It was called Nasser, and it still exists. Now it's co-educational. When I went, it was just girls. And Nasser was started by a woman called Begum Anis Khan. And Anis Khan was from a feudal Hyderabadi family, old family. And I think she had wanted these girls from those Nawabi families to have access to English medium education, which for several reasons they were being probably deprived of. And when she opened Nasser, she did it for maybe primarily these girls, but
Mm.
anybody from any religion could attend. And she had an extremely enlightened approach to education for girls. Were full of sports and painting. She would give us 2 or 3 months off. At least it felt like 2 or 3, but maybe it was just 1 month when we could just paint or do whatever we wanted. And so I studied in what I now realize was a very unusual school. At that time, it just seemed normal, which was full of Muslim girls as well as Hindu girls who were studying together. But because it was a Muslim school, we were very aware that when in the old city there'd be communal violence of any kind, our school, we would have to go home very quickly because they'd want to shut the school quickly.
Mhm.
So I think that sort of thing, when it happens to you as a child, even if you're not aware of its impact at that time, later on it really strikes you as what was that all about, this
Yeah.
constant fear.
Yeah, yeah. It's like mild PTSD, but you don't know what happened then. I mean, as a
Yeah,
child, it's all
yeah, because at that time you just rely on the grown-ups
grown up.
to
Yeah,
get you home or whatever it is. But
yeah.
now I understand that if that was the situation for children in a school,
Mhm.
because it was a Muslim school, if you translate that to a gigantically larger situation to the whole country now, for example, if you see the whole country as these enclaves where, you know, where there must be Muslims feeling similarly uh, fearful, but they have nowhere to escape because where can you go? There's no grown up who's going to come and take you away to a safe place.
Right. Um, And do you want to tell us a little bit about the religious violence itself that you portrayed in the book from the 1980s, how it's a reflection of what's happening in India today?
I guess the big difference at that time was that I think religious violence has always been around in India, as we know from the partition itself and before what led to the partition and so on. But what we experienced in the 80s or 70s or whatever were all there was no sense of a of the whole of the country itself being dominated by this. These were more like pockets. They would erupt, they would subside, but you didn't have a sense. Maybe we were mistaken, but we didn't have a sense of the whole country turning into somewhere that toxic events could happen unpunished and unnoticed and become part of routine violence, which is the big difference now. I think now the sense of dailiness about this is what is really disturbing and dangerous at the moment.
And when you live slightly isolated lives in the mountains, I mean, I know it's not Rani Khet is still not.
Mhm.
Do you worry or fear sometimes because um, if anything happens there versus in a city where it's easier to get help?
No, in Ranikhet, it's we have a very old neighbor, for example. She's a village woman, and once when I remember there was a huge amount of violence going on in Delhi during the Delhi riots, when they found bodies in the canals later and so on. There was this old woman telling me that we in Ranikhet, we still live in some sort of blessed and magical place, that we don't have anything like this. And she kept saying, uh, I hope this never comes, travels up the hills and comes to the hills as well, what is happening in the plains. So I, I wouldn't say at all that this is some idealized place where people are, not religion minded or communal minded, not at all. But there is no religious violence here so far. So we feel quite different and safe here as opposed to the plains.
That's great. And coming back to the religious violence, you have this love story. Uh,
Hmm.
Tell us a little bit about it. I mean, the reason he's making the horse, dreaming about it.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about this love story.
Well, in the book has at the center this potter. He's a traditional potter called Ilango, and he's an educated fellow who could have done something because his father didn't want him to continue as a potter, knowing the whole drudgery of that life. So he's given his sons an education. His older brother actually works as a tout in the land's office, but Ilango he's decided he wants to remain a potter because that's what his passion is, and he sells pots at a weekly kind of market or street market. And this is where he meets this girl who he doesn't know at that time to be a Muslim. But he meets her, and they fall in love, and he knows that there's this gigantic barrier between them which is almost impossible to cross. And the novel is really about how he finds a way to to make this horse as a gift for her, and how her father becomes involved in this horse and in the making of this horse, and how a series of events in his neighborhood with which don't all have to do with religion, but religion is used in a way to drive him to the brink. I don't want to give too much away, but the interreligious marriage even in the 80s was not considered uh, the best thing in the world for a family. And but at that time it was a family thing. The family or the community might not want a couple to marry across religions. Now it's become much more institutionalized. It's become a governmental thing. The state has been interfering quite a bit in many parts of India when a Hindu or a Muslim and a Muslim want to get married. So
Right.
things in many senses were easier at that time, but it was still quite difficult. And the book is about the difficulties of the book actually looks at the whole business of religious division through the making of this horse, through the love of these two people for each other, and it looks at how it works within a small community and how this dog kind of crosses all these barriers to bring people together in some ways.
It's a beautiful, beautiful book, and it's a beautiful premise. And thank you so much. I had one last question. It's a bit early, so I think we don't have viewers up yet. I think
Okay.
everyone's trying to get some sleep on Saturday, but we will be telecasting it. And again, as a writer and someone who's such a who has loved your books for so long, when you get an idea, how do you know it's a novel? Because there's so much as a writer that we write and then we abandon it. I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
I may write 20,000 words and abandon it, and
Yeah, yeah. I've done the same. It you feel really foolish after that.
yeah, and so has it gone in, and sometimes it's really good, but it's not going, and you're like, oh, I want to tear your hair by then.
Yeah.
How do you know what is a book and what isn't?
That's really the hardest thing, isn't it? That you don't know whether the world you are dreaming up will make sense to anybody else and whether it makes sense even to you after a month. You
Hmm.
might go back to it and realize it was all pretty bad. Or you might actually have written something very good and you think it's very bad because you've written it and you've lost perspective and you are tired of it after a while. So I think these are the times when you really need other people reading your work as well. I mean, one way I know that something is good is if I'm feeling charged up about it, if it's keeping me awake at night thinking about it, if I'm thinking about it all the time and it's making me feel energized and not bored, and if I'm bored with it, everybody else will be bored with it. So if I'm feeling involved and I'm feeling grief and the characters are feeling grief, all of that goes into knowing that the book is alive and that it can go somewhere.
I feel that's also a reason why there's so much urgency in getting that first draft
Yeah,
out. I think Jeff
absolutely.
Ward talks about it. Is that
Yeah,
energy? You want to just chase it and
yeah,
put it down because it's so elusive.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
in my
yeah,
case, I think or the characters will just grow and they'll become something else if you give it too much time, and then you're just
yeah, yes.
it's like a web series. It just endless.
Yes. And actually, you never know because from the very first book, I have been thinking this is it, and I'm not going to be, I don't want to, and I'm not interested in putting myself through the torture of writing another novel again. So each time I think this is it. But somehow I've got to book number five, but am again, I think this is it. But I don't know if I'm right or wrong about it.
When did the first one come out? Which
My first book came out in 2008, but it was finished in 2007, and I think I would have begun writing it. It took about 3 years to write, I think,
Mhm.
and that book was finally titled An Atlas of Impossible Longing,
Mhm.
and it had begun with an image of a house that was being submerged in water. And this house kind of was haunting me, and I didn't know why. I still don't know why, because I know that I used to go to the very ancient and moldering North Calcutta house of my Pishi, my father's sister. And
Yes.
she had married into one of these old families which had a lot of land, feudal families of Bengal. And as you climbed up the stairs to her part of the old house, there was this picture photograph on the landing of her. pillared house that had water right up to the middle of the pillars. And this was their actual sort of home, family home, which had been which had gone underwater because the river had changed course.
Wow.
And I don't know how that lodged in my head or when. I wasn't aware of this as a child seeing that photo, but that's the image that was in my head when I started this book. And this whole scene came out of nowhere where a girl is being born in the middle of the rain that will drown this house. And ultimately, that chapter came somewhere in the middle of the book, but the book grew all around it. And I wasn't even aware that I was starting a novel. It just happened in that way.
See, that's another reason why we don't share the first draft. You don't know what is
Yeah,
going there. Wow.
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
So that, and at that time, we had just left the OUP and we had just started Permanent Black. Things were very fluid. I was feeling a little, I mean, it was a big change for us in the direction of our own lives. There was a huge amount of uncertainty, but I think all that turmoil provided me with that blank space in which to begin to write. Before that, I didn't feel the need to write the novel, any novel at all, because I was very happy publishing books. I was an editor, and that's what I enjoyed doing. So maybe there has to be some sense of, you know, some sort of gap or space that opens up a different aspect of yourself to you.
right. Well, thank you so much, Anuradha, for your time. And it is such a beautiful book. Yes,
Thank you.
thank you. This
Thank
was
you so much for your questions, which were lovely. Made me think about things in a different way.
thank you. I was a,
Thanks.
it was a total delight.
Okay.
So thank
I'm
you.
glad we managed to meet up finally, and it must be quite late in the night for you right now.
Yes, it's not so late. It's about almost 9 o'clock. I'll
Okay.
just say goodbye and we'll take this off camera. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Kalinga Literary Festival,
Okay.
and have a lovely weekend.
Thank you. Thanks so much.